Well, hey everyone, welcome to Small Group. Thanks so much for being part of it this week. My name is Dave. I'm the pastor of our high school community here at the Kennet campus. I hope that you've had a great week. I hope that you've already had a great time being with your friends, being with your small group this evening. Now, before we get into our study, I just want to call attention to this amazing beanie. Now listen, this is a Willowdale students beanie. I actually had a bunch of them made up for our small group leaders just as a way of saying thank you to them. And we made some up for our General campus as well. But some of you have been mentioning to me that you think you like the beanie and maybe you'd actually want one for yourself as well. So keep that going because I can get some made if people would be interested in buying some. So just let me know about that. But hey, let's get into small group for this week. So as a community, we're studying the Gospel of John. Now, the Gospel of John, it's a book in the Bible, and it was a book that's actually written about the life of Jesus, the things that he said and the things that he did. And in our study, we're actually inviting Jesus to tell us who he is, because we project all sorts of expectations and assumptions on to Jesus. So I hope that you've been encouraged in this study, if you've been part of it the last couple of weeks, as Jesus has told us amazing things about who he is. Jesus wants to step into the dark and scary places of life. Jesus wants to bring his healing power, his love, his soul nourishment to each of us. Well, this week we're going to take a look at really two different passages that I'm excited about because they say something really important about who Jesus is and how he behaves. Now, first, let me tell you this. Growing up in the days before Netflix, I know because I'm old, before there was YouTube or really the internet as we know it, me and my buddies would occasionally spend an afternoon after school or maybe a Saturday morning flipping through TV stations. Now, on certain occasions, we would come across some sort of talk show where the host would be interviewing people who have had a bizarre or a difficult experience in life. I mean, these shows, they're trying to get people to watch, so they're going to show some of the weirdest stuff possible. Now, anyways, on a few different occasions, I saw people being interviewed, and what made them interesting was that they'd never actually cried before. They had different reasons for why they didn't cry, but it always came back to one simple truth. They struggled to be vulnerable. Now, when you think of it, who wants to be vulnerable? The idea of vulnerability, being exposed to the possibility of emotional harm, is not something we're looking for. I can think of times in my life when I felt vulnerable. Maybe it was asking a girl out on a date or, being afraid of being rejected. Maybe it was being called on in class and being afraid of being made fun of for getting the wrong answer. Bottom line is, I didn't like feeling vulnerable. None of us like feeling vulnerable. In fact, we all go to great lengths to avoid being vulnerable. Some of us work really hard to get good grades so we don't have to worry about telling our parents we didn't do well. Some of us avoid building meaningful friendships because we don't want to be hurt when they move away. Some of us stay quiet because we don't want to be honest in front of other people and risk humiliation. But there's power in vulnerability. In fact, I think our willingness to be vulnerable is directly related to our ability to be loved. Think of it this way. Can someone really love you if they don't know everything about you? Can they really love you if you're not incredibly and entirely honest with them? All they can really love are the parts that they know. It's kind of like any dating relationship. Your boyfriend or your girlfriend really likes the parts of you that they've gotten to know. But when something comes up that they don't like, that thing is over. But what if there could be a relationship where you are truly and wholly loved? People have always said that marriage is supposed to be that way. But 50% of marriages end in divorce. That means that half of all married couples say they find things they can't love in their spouse. In fact, research shows that people are getting married later and later in life, in large part due to the fact that more and more marriages fail. In other words, people want to avoid the pain and hurt that comes with being vulnerable. And then being disregarded or rejected or cast aside as unlovable. And I think this issue with vulnerability plays into our willingness to look to Jesus and engage in an active relationship with Jesus. In this week's passage, we're going to look at 3 different interactions that Jesus has. The first is with the Pharisees. And in this conversation, Jesus outs himself as divine. He says that he and God are one. The Pharisees are furious. They pick up stones. They actually prepare to beat him to death. They actually go on, they tell Jesus that while they're cool with the good things that he's been doing, all those miracles that Jesus has been performing, they're not cool with the claim that Jesus is God. I think that we are a lot like the Pharisees. I think we're cool with Jesus wanting to do nice things for us. But when it comes to Jesus claiming to be God, we're out. I think we don't want to have to deal with the ramifications of Jesus actually being God. So instead of being vulnerable and honest, we get prideful, hard-hearted, and distant. A lot of us stay away from church or difficult conversations for that very reason. Now, another story we encounter this week comes from John chapter 11, verses 1 to 16, and then verses 28 to 44. This is the story of a miracle that Jesus performs. You see, Jesus traveled a lot, and in his trips, he would make friends and he would build all sorts of important relationships. One such relationship was with a man named Lazarus. Now, long story short, but Lazarus tragically dies. But here's the catch. Jesus knows about his death and doesn't run off to prevent it. It's in this moment that Jesus' disciples and friends are confused. They're thinking, how can loving Jesus be so distant and uninterested in this? A lot of us have thought the exact same thing. If Jesus cares about me, then why hasn't he fixed my problem? It's this belief that God doesn't care that actually encourages us to be people who aren't vulnerable with God. You see, we don't invite God into the challenges of life because we don't want to be hurt. Well, the story actually goes on, and we discover that Jesus had greater plans than just preventing a death. What we learn about Jesus is that he actually feels the heartache of our sorrow and steps in to bring peace. You see, as the story goes on, and as you'll see in a couple of minutes, Jesus actually eventually raises Lazarus from the dead. But he also allowed himself to grieve, to be sad, and to actually cry with Lazarus' family because of his death. Jesus chooses to feel sorrow. And that's what we need to hear this week. We can be vulnerable and honest with Jesus because he actually cares about it, because he wants to be in those emotions with us. If we're feeling sorrow or anxiety or fear, Jesus wants to step into that. And so that's what's remarkable about Jesus. He actually cares about us. And so I hope you could be vulnerable with God this week because he longs to have a real, honest relationship with you. So remember, Jesus chooses to step into our emotions with us. He's not obligated to do so. It's his free choice. And in that, we experience love because he comes to us. He sits with us, and then he longs to lead us out. And so I hope that you can be vulnerable with Jesus in your heart, in your prayers this week, in this conversation with your small group leaders and your friends this evening. Thanks for being in small group.